You were never the man I thought you were, Darren. You're just small. You've always been small. She said that to me on a Tuesday, standing in our kitchen, still wearing the perfume she'd put on for him, holding a coffee mug with both hands like the conversation was casual, like she was reading me a weather report. You are small. 7 years of marriage distilled into 4 words she delivered without even raising her voice. My name is Darren Stark, and I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. I am not a man who acts on emotion. My father raised me to think before I moved, to read a room before I spoke, to understand that the most dangerous thing a man can do is react before he understands the full geometry of a situation. Gerald Stark taught me that in the way most fathers teach their sons things, not by sitting them down with a lesson, but by living it so consistently that it becomes the air the son breathes. My father has been dead for 15 years, but his fingerprints are on every decision I have ever made. I tell you that now because when Karen said those words, "You are small," I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I set down the keys I was holding, looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, and walked out the front door. What she didn't know, what she could not have known, was that I had been waiting for a moment like that one. Not because I wanted to be betrayed. No man wants to be betrayed by the woman he bought lilies for every anniversary. No man wants to stand in the architecture of a life he built carefully and discover the foundation was dissolving. But I had been carrying something for 8 years. A long, quiet plan. The kind that doesn't make noise because noise is how you lose. It had started the night I sat in my father's hospital room and watched a man I would one day destroy hold my dying father's hand and weep. And still, in the same week, bring a document for him to sign that would legally erase everything my father had spent his life building. Bartholomew Tate. But, to his friends. Sir, to the woman who would become my wife, who was at that very moment wearing his cologne on her skin and telling me I was small in my own kitchen. I drove to the Alderton building that night. I took the elevator to my office on the 21st floor. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the shareholder registry I had been quietly updating for 8 years, and looked at the number that had been my North Star through every sacrifice, every silence, every long night. 34.2%. I picked up my phone and called the only number in it I had never dialed from home. 3 rings. Darren. I said 4 words. It's time. Move everything. I gave Karen 3 days. Not out of weakness. Not because I was sitting somewhere processing my grief over takeout containers and old photographs. I gave her 3 days because 3 days was exactly how long Wallace needed to finalize the valuation report, and I am not a man who moves before his paperwork is clean. I want you to understand what those 3 days looked like from her side, because it matters. She went back to our house. She slept in our bed. She moved through our kitchen and our living room and our life like it still belonged to her, because she believed it did. I know Karen. I loved Karen for 7 years with the kind of attention most people reserve for things they are afraid to lose. I know exactly how her mind works when she's cornered. She would have told herself I was processing, that I would come back red-eyed and broken, and she would cry and I would forgive her because that is what small men do. That is what she believed I was. She texted me twice. I read both messages. I didn't respond to either. On the morning of the 4th day, I sent a courier to the house. The courier had one instruction: leave the envelope on the kitchen table and do not wait for a signature. I was sitting in Wallace's office when my phone buzzed. Not a call, a text, from a number I recognized as Bart Tate's private line, a number I had never been supposed to have, but had acquired 18 months ago through a contact I will not name. The text said only, "Call me." Now, I put the phone face down on Wallace's desk and kept reading the deposition summary in front of me. Here is what Karen found in that envelope. Not a letter, not divorce papers, not the emotional grenade she had prepared herself to detonate and survive. What she pulled out of that envelope was a 14-page business valuation report, professionally formatted, bearing the letterhead of Crestwood and Hale, one of the 3 most respected corporate law firms in the state. The subject line read, Independent Valuation of Tate Meridian Group Holdings, Silent Investment Interest, D.A. Stock, 34.2%. I have tried to imagine her face in that moment. I've tried many times. Karen is not a stupid woman. That was never her problem. Her problem was that she decided, somewhere along the way, that intelligence and ambition required a more impressive stage than the one I was providing. So when her brain processed what she was holding, when the number and the company name and my initials assembled themselves into a coherent reality, I imagined the specific horror of it was not just shock. It was retrograde shame. The slow, sickening realization that the man she had called small had been standing in the ruins of something vast the entire time, quietly rebuilding it, while she looked right through him. She called Bart. He picked up on the second ring. She said, "Did you know my husband owns 34% of your company?" I know what came next because Bart's private line was already being monitored by then. His voice, for the first time in 30 years of practiced composure, cracked. "Let me tell you about Wallace. His full name is Wallace Okafor. He charges $900 an hour, and he has never once in 20 years been wrong about a number. I found him 7 years ago through a contact in commercial real estate, back when I was still in the early stages of the acquisition and needed someone who could read a shareholder agreement the way a surgeon reads an x-ray, not just what's there, but what's been broken and where. I told Wallace everything the first night we met. About my father, about Bart, about the document signed in a hospital room by a man who trusted the wrong person with his last coherent weeks on Earth. Wallace listened without interrupting, which I respected. Then he asked me one question. "How long are you prepared to wait?" I told him however long it takes. He nodded. He picked up his pen, and we began. The legal move I triggered the morning after Karen found the envelope was something Wallace and I had rehearsed so many times it had lost its drama. Under the terms of a shareholder agreement drafted in 1989, back when Tate Meridian Group was operating out of a single rented office and Bart's ego had not yet outgrown his judgment, any silent investor holding more than 30% equity retained the right to request a formal board audit within 90 days of a material undisclosed conflict of interest involving an executive. The clause was buried in Section 7, subsection 4, paragraph C, 11 lines of legal language that Bart's attorneys had reviewed every 5 years during standard agreement renewals and flagged consistently as boilerplate, irrelevant, legacy language from the company's founding era, not worth the revision cost to remove. My father negotiated that clause. He told me about it once, when I was 17, when I had no framework yet to understand why it mattered. He said, "Darren, always make sure the door swings both ways. You never know which direction you'll need to leave from." I filed the audit request by fax, because the 1989 agreement specified fax, and I had read every word. The conflict of interest I cited was precise and surgical. The CEO of Tate Meridian Group has engaged in a personal relationship with the spouse of a silent equity partner, creating a direct breach of fiduciary trust under Section 7.4 C of the original partnership agreement. By noon, Bart's general counsel was on the phone with Bart. By 2 in the afternoon, Bart's assistant was quietly canceling his afternoon. By 4, Bart was sitting alone in his own conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he believed he owned, holding a document he had not thought about in over a decade. His signature was on page 1. My father's signature was on page 2. I know he poured himself a drink. I know because the surveillance report Wallace commissioned described the bar cart being moved. I know because men like Bart Tate only pour themselves a drink alone when something has genuinely frightened them. My father frightened him from beyond the grave. I found that appropriate. The Harrington Foundation Gala is the kind of event where wealth doesn't announce itself. It simply assumes you already know. I arrived with one intention, not to be seen, to observe Lena Tate. I had studied her from a distance for months. Not romantically, strategically. She attended these events alone. Bart always arrived late, made his circuit, disappeared. Lena stayed. She smiled at the right people, laughed at the right moments, and behind it all carried the specific stillness of a woman performing composure so consistently it had become structural. I was standing near the bar when she turned too quickly and champagne splashed across my shirt. She gasped, reached forward with a napkin, looked up. Her eyes were extremely awake. She pressed the napkin to my shirt twice. Then she stopped, looked at me directly, and dropped her voice to something just above a breath. "I know who you are, Mr. Stark. and I know what your wife has been doing with my husband." I didn't move. She reached into her clutch and pressed a business card into my palm. Held my gaze, not flirtatiously, but with the gravity of a woman who has been building something alone for a long time and has just found the missing piece. Then she turned and walked away, perfectly composed, touching an elbow, nodding at a guest, performing flawlessly. I looked at the card. On the back, in her handwriting, "We should talk. I've been waiting for someone like you." Across the room, Bart walked in 20 minutes late and immediately scanned the crowd for his wife. He found her laughing with the foundation director. He did not see me at all. I closed my fist around the card. We met 4 days later in a private room at a members-only restaurant that doesn't have a sign outside. Lena arrived first. I respected that immediately. No small talk. She laid it out cleanly, the way people talk when they've rehearsed something alone for so long that the performance has burned away and only the truth remains. She had known about Bart's affairs for 2 years. She had not cried. She had not confronted him. What she had done was build a file, methodically, legally, with a private investigator paid in cash and a lawyer retained under her maiden name, Vasquez. "I need your equity stake," she said. "You vote with me at board level. We trigger a leadership review. Combined with what I have, Bart loses the company." I asked what she wanted in return. My freedom. My name. The 7 years I spent being his most expensive decoration. I nodded slowly. "What do I get?" "Justice," she said. "And the company your father helped build." I went still. She knew about my father. I had told nobody. Not Karen. Not anyone outside Wallace's office. Before I could respond, she placed a manila folder on the table between us. No drama. Just placed it there. I opened it. Photographs. Surveillance quality. Time-stamped. Karen and Bart, a hotel. 18 months ago. Karen and Bart, a restaurant. 22 months ago. Karen and Bart, the company retreat in Aspen. 26 months ago. 26 months ago, I had taken Karen to dinner for her birthday. Written her a card. Meant every word. She had kissed me goodnight and said she was tired. She had already been with Bart Tate for 8 weeks. I closed the folder. I was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When do we start?" It began quietly. Darren and Lena, same events. Industry dinners. A gallery opening. A business forum. Always separately seated. Never photographed arriving together. But people in these circles notice everything. 3 weeks in, we were seated 2 tables apart at the Prescott Group annual dinner. She laughed at something I said across the table, a real laugh, one that reached her eyes, rare enough that people who knew her registered it immediately. From across the room, Bart registered it too. I saw him see it. The slight stiffening in his shoulders. The way his eyes stayed on her 2 seconds longer than they should have. Bart Tate has not wanted Lena in years, but he has always needed to be the one who could have her. It is the particular possessiveness of a man who treats people like assets on a balance sheet. He excused himself from his table. He stepped into the hallway. He called Karen. I know this because his private line was still being monitored. She picked up immediately. Bart said, "Your husband is sitting 2 tables from my wife and making her laugh." A pause. Then Karen, and this is the part that surprised even me, said, "Good. Maybe she can have him." Bart went very still. "What did you just say?" Her voice was flat and slightly terrifying. "If you're calling me worried about your wife, Bart, maybe you should have thought about that before you stopped caring about mine." She hung up. Bart stood in that hallway and felt, for just a moment, exactly what I had felt standing in that bedroom doorway. I did not feel sorry for him. Not even slightly. She came to my building on a Thursday night. The front desk called up. I almost said no. Then something in her voice through the phone. Wet, rough, the way Karen sounds when she's genuinely crying rather than performing it, made me tell them to let her up. She arrived at my door in a gray coat, no makeup, hair slightly undone. She started talking. About pressure. About feeling invisible. About Bart making her feel seen when she'd felt like she was disappearing inside our life. I handed her a glass of water. I listened, and 4 minutes into her speech, I noticed her left hand resting on the chair arm, fingers loosely curled, and between her index and middle finger, almost invisible, the soft glow of an active phone screen. Recording. She was manufacturing a reconciliation scene. Something she could timestamp and present to a divorce attorney. Evidence of an ongoing marriage. Enough to muddy my asset protection. Enough to contest the financial restructuring I'd already filed. I looked at that glow for exactly 1 second. Then I reached in my shirt pocket and placed my own recorder on the table. Red light on since she walked through the door. I know, I said. The blood left her face. I know you're recording this. Karen, I've been recording this. And when your lawyer calls mine tomorrow, mine will have already filed. I crossed to the door and opened it. I don't hate you, I said. And I meant it. But I will not let you do to my future what you already did to my present. Good night. She left. I closed the door, sat back down, and exhaled for the first time in weeks. Bart requested a meeting at a location of my choosing. That alone told me everything. Bart Tate does not ask. He summons. The fact that he was extending the courtesy of my choosing meant he was already negotiating from Faye. We met in my office. Not a rented room. Mine. He opened a leather portfolio and slid a check across the desk without preamble. $5 million. From a private holding company, not his personal account. Carefully structured. He'd done this before. Walk away, he said. From the board request. The equity. Whatever you and my wife are. $5 million. Clean. I picked up the check. He sat back. He knows the pause before acceptance. He's read it 1,000 times across 1,000 desks. I tore the check in half, then tore those halves in half again, placed the 4 pieces neatly on the desk between us. I looked at him and said, very quietly, your father put mine in the ground. Something moved behind his eyes, deep and involuntary. Your father manipulated a dying man into signing away everything he'd built. My father died believing he'd failed our family. He didn't fail us. You took it from him. From us. Silence. This isn't about Karen. This isn't about $5 million. This is about Gerald Stark. And it ends when I say it ends. Bart stood, picked up his portfolio. At the door he turned. You have no idea what you're walking into. I didn't look up from my desk. Neither did my father. Difference is, I'm not dying. The Tate Meridian quarterly press briefing is held in the ballroom of the Meridian Grand, Bart's own hotel. His name on the building because he has always needed his name on things. I watched it on a live stream from my office. Lena sat front row. Cream dress. Perfect posture. A slight composed smile. A journalist asked about the board audit. Bart dismissed it smoothly. Then a journalist, third row, someone I had placed there, asked about the Delmore acquisition. Bart's smile flickered. Gone in under a second. But Lena saw it. I saw it on the feed. The Delmore deal. 3 years ago. Framed publicly as a rescue acquisition, saving 1,200 jobs. Privately, it included an asset stripping clause that dismantled the company's pension fund 14 months after closing. 1,100 employees lost their retirement savings. Lena had the recording of Bart's general counsel acknowledging it was anticipated and accepted at the executive level. She had carried that recording for 14 months. She stood up. The room looked at her with the mild curiosity reserved for powerful men's wives who move unexpectedly. She took her phone from her clutch, opened the audio file, and pressed play. The voice filled the ballroom. The pension outcome was anticipated and accepted at the executive level. Bart reviewed the actuarial summary and signed off. Complete silence. Lena looked at her husband with the calm of a woman who has been waiting a long time and is therefore doing this without hurry. Then she said pleasantly to the room, I thought that would be relevant context for your questions. And she sat back down. Every camera turned to Bart. For the first time in his professional life, Bartholomew Tate had no response prepared. The emergency board meeting was held on a Wednesday. 12 board members. Legal teams on both sides. Me at the end of the table with Wallace and my attorney. The motion, a vote of no confidence in CEO Bartholomew Tate, followed by leadership restructuring and an independent audit of the Delmore acquisition. For the motion to pass, 7 votes. My 34.2% translated to 4 decisive swing votes. The chairman called the meeting to order. Then the door opened. Karen walked in, dressed too carefully, eyes finding me immediately across the room. She spoke over the chairman. I apologize for the interruption. I'm Karen Stark. My husband is a stakeholder and I'm requesting 30 seconds. The room looked at me. I nodded once. She turned to me. In front of 12 board members, 4 attorneys, 2 advisors, and a court stenographer, she said, Darren, whatever happened between us, please don't do this. There are thousands of employees. Families. Don't let what I did destroy something Bart has spent his life building. She was not wrong about the employees. I had thought about nothing else. She was also using them as a human shield. I looked at her for a long moment. Something crossed my face that people in that room would later describe differently. Some said sorrow. Some said resolve. Some said nothing at all. I turned to the chairman and raised my hand. For the motion, 7 in favor, 5 opposed. Bart Tate was removed as CEO of the company he had controlled for 30 years. Karen closed her eyes. What she didn't know, what she'd assumed without asking, was that the restructuring proposal I placed on the table next had the employees fully protected. The audit was designed to recover, not destroy. She had underestimated me. One final time. 6 months later. The building has a new name. Stark Meridian Group. My father's name. Finally, on the structure his hands helped conceive. The sign went up on a Tuesday morning, and I stood on the pavement below and looked at it for a long time without speaking. Bart is under SEC investigation. Cooperating, his attorneys advise. Karen received her settlement. Modest, because she'd signed away contestation rights during the window when she believed cooperation might soften outcomes. She lives smaller now. She is, by all accounts, thinking more clearly than she has in years. I am on the roof terrace of the Stark Meridian building on a Tuesday evening. The city below is lit and moving. I have a glass of water. I don't drink. I never have. Lena steps through the glass door and stands beside me. She is Lena Vasquez again. Her divorce finalized 43 days ago. She received what she was contractual owed. She had an excellent prenuptial attorney, it turns out, and she had been quietly excellent about many things for a very long time. We stand without speaking for a while. Then she says, "You know this isn't how revenge stories are supposed to end." How are they supposed to end? I ask. Someone ruined. Someone crying. Someone losing everything. I think about this. Bart lost the company. Karen lost the life she was chasing. But you don't look satisfied, she says. You look like someone who finished something they needed to finish. That's different from revenge. What would you call it? She looks at me the way she looked at me the night she handed me her card. Inheritance, she says. You got back what was taken. That's restoration, not revenge. Then, softer, I think your father would have liked this building. Something in me, braced and tightened and tactical for 8 years, releases. I reach into my jacket pocket and place the photograph on the rail between us. 2 men in hard hats. Groundbreaking day, 1989. Both laughing. Both young. Gerald Stark and Bartholomew Tate. Before everything. Lena looks at it for a long moment. Then her hand moves to the rail. Mine is already there. The space between us narrows. The city keeps moving below, indifferent, brilliant, and entirely unaware that a son just finished what his father started.